Welcome to my review of Ninja 1987. And I believe this one is on multiple platforms. I played this one on Switch, though I'm assuming it's on a few other platforms. It took me around 1 hour, 43 minutes to beat. And this game is kind of like a budget Ninja Gaiden for NES. You know, it's like a worse version and worsely made version of Ninja Gaiden, but it's still kind of fun. I did have some enjoyment with it. It's a pretty easy one to cruise through because the bosses have very simple patterns. And the stages you can kind of bullshit your way through without much skill because you have, two special moves that you can use on each stage. Or section, I should say. Because if you die, you start right back at the section you left off at. So you can use two of those. And you can kind of just bum rush through a lot of the stages with that. You still have to play somewhat decently, but you can pull a lot of bullshit between the throwing stars and the special move, which is like a dash across the screen. I think there's also a move that kind of clears the screen and fills it with flames, but I actually forgot how to use that when I beat the rest of the game when I came back to it, so I was probably missing out on that. But I don't think it was very good on bosses, from what I remember. But yeah, it's mostly in the Ninja Gaiden style, except you can freely climb up the walls instead of having a wall jump up walls. So it's kind of like that, but not nearly as good as those games, but it plays well enough. So the gameplay is tight, but it's just like the layouts are nothing too exciting or challenging. You can kind of take your time and kind of bullshit your way through the stages. So it's really nothing too challenging, but it was a cheap game, and I thought it was fun for a few bucks. The bosses, even though they have simple patterns, some of them can still be kind of annoying because it's not really always clear as to what to do. But once you do know what to do, the patterns are usually extremely simple. So, it's a lot more, simpler in pattern than the Ninja Gaiden for NES, which even that, a lot of the bosses would have fairly simple patterns too once you knew what to do. But this is a screen clearing magic, which I had forgotten how to do later in the game, but you really don't need it. A lot of times you're better off just doing the dash move and dashing through shit because it gives you invincibility frames. So a lot of these sections I would beat my first time when I had a full life bar because, with a full life bar and all your magic and everything, you can kind of bullshit your way through without too much trouble. This boss was kind of irritating even though it's kind of simple because there's a lot of bullets and you got to kind of work your way through. I'm not sure how much the flame magic really helped on this. I think it does a little damage. But, not a very interesting boss fight, but kind of irritating. But the boss fights are kind of generic like this mostly. They're not. I wouldn't say they're really like bad boss fights or anything, but they're really not that good either. So it's kind of like a simpler Ninja Gaiden for NES kind of game. And I show some of the boss fights in full just to give you an idea. The game does save on the last stage that you made it to, but not the sections as far as I'm aware. So this boss was kind of irritating initially when I didn't know what to do, but it's actually very simple. You just jump over him at a certain time and then slash him in the back, pretty much. It's actually, very simple, but initially I wasn't really sure exactly when the opening was, but once you know that, it's really easy. And it just repeats the same shit with there's no variation or anything. It just stays very simple. And that's how most of this game is, It's kind of like just a very simple Ninja Gaiden, So it's not going to throw too much at you, and it is forgiving with the, you get to start back at the last section you got to. Now, if you shut the game off, I think it saves on the beginning of the world you got to, so, it won't save the little sections, I don't think. So as long as you leave it on, you won't have to redo any sections. But really, most of the enemies, it's just about knowing what they're going to do. They all have the same patterns each time you encounter them, so once you know the enemies, you know what they're going to do. And you can see I was playing pretty shitty, and I was able to bullshit my way through just by, spamming like the dash, using the dash on the harder sections. I would save it for parts that were kind of irritating and just bust through. Because the dash is invincible, it's invincible and it'll warp you pretty far ahead. And then you just get to these little exits and then you got your next checkpoint. So, you just rinse and repeat that for the whole game pretty much. And it's pretty simple. Might be a few parts that are a little challenging, but nothing too challenging. When you continue, you see you start right back at the section. So there's no lives or anything. It's just, you just continue at the beginning of the section. The sections are determined by the exit doors. So once you go through an exit door, you're in the next section. And the worlds are determined by beating a boss usually. So once you complete the main boss for the stage, you're in the next world. And there's a big indicator, it shows a little cinematic scene, a little screen in between. But you can see there's not much to this game. It's quite simple. But it's still fun. Sometimes that's all it takes to make an enjoyable short game. Not really one I would replay or anything like that, but it's fun for a one-time playthrough just as a game to beat. I like filling out the kill list, so I always like finding these kind of games that are kind of short and fun to play through. So it's a solid game for that. Nothing that stands out or anything like that, though. You know what I mean? It's not anything special, but it's still kind of a fun game to play through if you like these old-style games. And it's also a good one if you find something like Ninja Gaiden, way too hard. This is a lot more approachable. So this is the final boss. And this is the most complex boss in the game pattern-wise, and it's really not much to it, but it at least has a few moves, which is unusual for the bosses of this game, so, there is that. I beat it pretty quickly, so I was still kind of experimenting, trying to see if I could find a safe spot or some shit in the corners of the screen. But yeah, that didn't work. You can also refill your throwing stars and things like that, and your magic, I believe, by picking stuff up. Usually from enemies you kill, but sometimes they're just out in the open that you can grab. But yeah, for me overall, I would say this game is a 6.5 out of 10, which means it's it's in the decent range. You know what I mean? It's not something that I would call a good game, but I think it's decent. I think it's worth playing through if you just like simple games every once in a while to play through. It's solid. And I think it's definitely worth a few bucks. For me, it's probably in the $5 range or something like that, If you have any questions, let me know, and thanks for watching.